listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. Tonight's show, Extreme Classics. I'm your host, Rob. My co host this evening, as usual, is the real Dr. V. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
That was a
Welcome to
rather.
Fright Night.
No, let's not get off on the wrong foot.
I
Um,
know.
yeah, so tonight's movie, Doctor, I'm pretty pumped up about this. On Extreme Classics, we do maybe one a month where we pick out an older movie that is considered a classic that we like, is a classic for us. It's a classic by
Uh,
almost anybody's
you
standards.
may
And Where
you may be
Eagles
pumped
Dare
up,
is that.
dude. Dude, you may be pumped up, but I'm soaring. I'm soaring like an eagle.
Fly like an eagle. You're not getting that reference. Yes, so Where Eagles Dare, Richard Burton and Clint Eastwood. And I know you're a bigger war fan than I am. So what I want to do is take a moment or two and talk about just the setup for this movie and my experience with it before we dive in and I ask you your original thoughts on here. For me, this is like an old-time classic type movie in that the acting, everything about it is almost perfect. It's a fairly long movie. It's a little over 2 hours. And to me, I personally like more of a paranoia thriller build-up stuff, almost like a slow burn. So to me, when I say this hopefully won't be taken out of context. And frankly, if it is, I don't give a rat's ass. I like the movie from the start all the way through, but I think it's almost at its perfect at the end of the first act. And then when it turns into the action part of the movie in the last, well, where they kill about 497 Nazis, I could care less about all that. Honestly, I like the intrigue. I really like the walking around the town. I just personally like that. And another big point for me too, for my initial thoughts is I like Clint Eastwood a lot. I'll watch anything with him. He's been around forever. We know this. My God, all I remember is as a kid, one of the first war movies I saw because they would have them on HBO were I think it's called like the Seabees or something with Richard Harris, I think, and a few Peter O'Toole and a few others. There's a couple of these types of movies that are in there, and they're all action spy type thriller movies. But for me, I had seen The Spy Who Came in from the Cold, and I had seen, honestly, the first time I saw Richard Burton was probably The Exorcist 2. And so I saw this guy, heard everything about him, heard about Liz Taylor, and as a kid, I had no idea what all that stuff was going on. My God, this man to me totally jumps off the screen. He's known as having an incredible voice, one of the best of all time, which he does. The way he delivers his lines, the way he acts. This to me, Doctor, and this is a surprise I'm going to punch you with early because you're soaring and I need to knock you down a little bit. While we may have covered when we launched a year ago around Mother's Day a couple ultimate movie mommies that we talked about, Unfaithful and a few others. A History of Violence comes to mind. This is the ultimate Father's Day movie because this is at a time in his life where even though he was an alcoholic and he had some injuries and he was a little older, apparently he was asked, hey, can you make something that the kids can watch? This is a fun action film. It's gratuitous with dumb violence, but it's killing Nazis. It's very adult-like. And after watching it several times, there's all these different layers that come up with it that I really, really like. And Richard Burton is just fantastic. This guy just, I, and I'm trolling you here a little bit, but not really. I think Richard Burton just totally slaps Clint Eastwood silly in here with how good he is. And then Clint Eastwood is not bad, but he does what he does, which is not speak a lot and shoot a lot of stuff, and that's exactly how it was designed. Fantastic. And I've never seen a guy act more like a man than Richard Burton in this movie. Perfect command of his crew, his everything about it. This is a man's man type movie. It's an all timer to me, instant classic. Now, 50 plus years ago, that's when this movie came out. Still friggin' good today. What's your initial take?
Like I was telling you offline, this was a good movie. It was a slow burner. I'm a big Clint Eastwood fan. Never. This is the first time I've ever seen Richard Burton. Richard Burton was phenomenal in this. From beginning to end. Uh, it was a slow burner, and it was pretty slow point up until till they got to the bar scene. Um, and honestly, if Clint Eastwood would have been in this movie at all whatsoever, and it would have been some nobody, I probably wouldn't have watched it because it didn't have anybody I knew or recognized.
Right.
Also, this is a movie that it's one of my dad's favorite films, and sadly he passed away 4 years ago.
Hmm.
But I wasn't able to talk to him about this. But yeah, he was a big Clint Eastwood fan and everything. Plus, he loved the old war movies, Kelly's Heroes and all this stuff.
Hmm.
He watched it all the time. It's a movie. My mom said he'd watch it. It'd be on TV. He'd like quiet woman, I'm watching. He would just go into the zone and just watch this. And it's a long movie. It's like watching a basketball game.
Oh God, no, it's not that long. My God, it is
It's
over
two,
two
I
hours.
saw
Yes.
it. It felt like 2.5 hours to me,
Hmm.
honestly. But we should be used to this because that's what Endgame was. This was what Infinity Wars was. A lot of these Marvel superhero movies are turning into like almost that long.
Well,
But
this movie's got a
and,
lot. Go ahead.
well, no, I was just saying this worked for this movie because if they would have cut this up, it wouldn't have been as great.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
way they needed a setup, you know. What confused me the whole entire movie until you find at the end is why is there American in there sneaking into a Nazi base, pretending to be a Nazi,
Well,
because and kind of answered my own question because back then World War II they did have there were German sympathizers. They went back to their country to fight for their country, or their families were there, but to help protect their families. But Clint Eastwood, as much as I love him, he can't. I'm so glad they didn't have him try to be do a German accent. He just basically he was quiet the whole time. And the other thing that was funny about this movie, there's only one scene in this whole entire movie is where the Germans are walking in the castle. The two guards, they're the only ones speaking German. Otherwise, everybody's speaking English.
well, I was going through my Twitter feed today. There's several people that are actively involved as far as classic movies, and some of them I like, some of them I could care less about. But the classic movie, at least my initial exposure so far to it, people who like the older movies in general, seem to be very passionate about it without being, a troller or triggered or any millennial type sympathizers that we have mostly dominating social media today. And I came across a line, and I don't know who it came from, and I thought it summed up this movie perfectly. It said the Germans got exactly what was coming to them because, for 2.5 hours, nobody in this town of Germany or in the castle recognized Richard Burton or Clint Eastwood, so they were able to successfully penetrate it and kill everybody. And
Yeah,
it's a testament to how popular these guys are because I tell you, when you said you'd never seen Richard Burton before, I don't expect that out of you as the millennial in the group. And I always like to joke and let everybody know that I'm obviously of an '80s kid growing up in the '70s and '80s, but for you being a little bit younger, for us to go back and reach some of these older films, I like to compare and contrast. Say some of the people on the Extreme Movie Show that are older listeners, or myself's age and yours. And Richard Burton, let's talk about him before we even get into the movie. What did you just think about him? You said this is the first time you had ever seen him. Did you know
first
anything
I've seen
about him
him.
or what?
This guy was more commanding than Shatner ever was in his TV series. The way he handled his role, the way he took charge. Um, his character is you don't know if you can trust him or not. You're watching this movie without even giving you the end part. No,
Hmm.
I'm just saying this is like phenomenal. And sadly he passed away when he was only like 56 or something. He didn't even make 60 yet.
Right.
Alcoholism and smoking and stuff. But no, I wish this guy would have been in more movies. I thought he was a great actor on a phenomenal. Sadly, he basically did plays after this. So, but this was his big film he's known for. Um, he's obviously from, I believe he's British. Yeah, he's actually from
He's
England.
actually technically Welsh, which is something I
Oh
was
well,
going to
yeah,
mention.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But
Like Tom Jones,
just
Shirley Bassey.
I I
Great
I know
voices.
from the very beginning, the scene where they're parachuting out of the plane, and then he goes to check on the guy with the radio, and they look at him like, he's dead. They're all sitting there, and then he looks at the guy's neck's broken,
But he
like
doesn't
somebody
do it
hit
when
him.
everybody's around. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. That
So,
paranoia early
so
on just sets the tone. It's fantastic.
and it's at that point, you're like, okay, somebody snapped his neck, or hit him and knocked and because his parachute did deploy, even if he hit the snow, I don't think his neck wouldn't snap like that. But so he was kind of suspicious, but then okay, so then you're like, okay, he can't be the guy because he just noticed it, picked it out, and then you see him meeting with someone. Because remember in the beginning of the plan, there was a girl. She didn't get out with all of them. So I'm like, what is going on here? Is he a double agent? What's going on? Because he's meeting with her in the shed or right outside. The stakes, they're all in the blizzard. How cool is that just the special, or not the special effects we would call them, but the scenery. They're in that little cabin. They're huddling for
Yeah.
warmth, and they're going out, and it's just a blizzard. I mean, Those are my, and it's a little rundown shack.
Mm-hmm.
It reminded me of when I played Red Dead Evolution number two, Red Dead Redemption 2, where the guys are in the western, and they're running from the cops, or what do you call them, the bounty hunters, and they went and they hid inside this little shack, and I came across. They're freezing to death, and they come across her. So I mean, how convenient was them to actually find a little shack out there? Because a lot of times the Germans would destroy a lot of stuff. They would just destroy your farms, everything. They kill you, they destroy everything in their path. So that was so much so much luck on their part. But yeah, I mean, I love that opening scene right there, because you don't know who you can trust, and then he goes back and he meets with the girl, and then like he's like, take off your clothes. Well, that was. He's like,
Yeah,
what?
for me
Oh,
with Richard Burton in this early on part, the part I really appreciated more rewatching it yesterday, as a matter of fact, because it's been years since I've seen this, a decade at least. Very early on, where they're capturing or they're going over the intel, and you get the build up from his boss and his boss's boss, who's like the man, and so they've set up this secret group of people that can do stuff, and so they handpicked everybody. And there's a lot of little details in here that I say again, if you watch it and you really pay attention to it, there's a lot of exposition in this. Richard Burton's fantastic in it, but some of the other stuff in there, um, when you pay attention to it and how it may fit in later, you realize it's not, ridiculous additional filler. And Alistair MacLean, who I guess the story is based off of, wrote the screenplay in the book and all that. He's sold gazillions of copies, like 10 times
yeah,
more than like any Bond stuff. I mean, it's just insane how much this guy sold. And I remember seeing his name everywhere, like at the library as a kid and on bookshelves everywhere. But for me, again, starting this off with Richard Burton, he's got such a presence. And here's the thing about Richard Burton: he's not ugly. He's actually
no,
kind of handsome looking, I think, when he's younger. But right here in this movie, he's at that age where he's not young, and he's not a physically imposing person. Like Clint Eastwood's in his 40s, I think, at this point here too, and he was always into fitness. He looks like a mean sob. Richard Burton does not. But Richard Burton, like I
well,
say,
yeah,
the way he talks, the way he carries himself, the way he's a very dynamic physical actor. And you had mentioned
he's
something
very smart.
earlier I wanted to touch on. And he's done movies, but he actually is known for his stage plays and a little bit of voiceover work. He really was known for just being awesome at Shakespeare and other things too. But just it's at the time, being in plays was a big deal. Going to movies was nice, and TV was like three different mediums. So to have some crossover, Richard even would say that, hey, I did it for the money. Tax rates after World War II skyrocketed, especially in all the pseudo-commie socialistic type environments that you have, like in Britain and in a lot of Europe. And actually, because of that, a lot of people think that they hasn't recovered. And while this is an economics podcast by any means, it's simply a statement that Richard Burton said, I'm moving out. I'm going to go live in France or Switzerland, I think it is, and I'm going to go make movies and make money. And he got a crap ton of money for this. And it doesn't matter about his drinking. It doesn't matter about his partying or carousing or what was going on. I've always heard he was just a really nice guy. And he's just like a pro's pro. Come to work, do your job, do it well, elevate the people around you. I mean, this guy is just solid gold. And so when you said if Clint Eastwood was in here, you weren't sure if you're going to watch it, I can understand that reaction. But for me,
Yeah,
this
because I
movie's all about Richard Burton. And yeah, it's set up phenomenally when he's asking questions about, well, how did he die? How did you know it? And then he meets the lady in the barn, and then you find out they have a past. And we'll see
yeah,
more of her
yeah.
later.
But yeah, this whole entire movie is like one thing after another. It's like, it's twists and turns. You don't know. It's like you said from the very beginning. You don't know who you can trust. And and you remember when they were in the briefing, he's like, same thing. Richard Burton's like, well, why don't you tell us what's going on? We don't tell us the plan, and the guy's like, kind of upset, and so then his boss is like, no, they're going in, there's a suicide mission, so otherwise let them know what they're doing, and they're going to arrest an American prisoner.
Hmm.
He's
And
like,
I'm
the one guy's like,
trying
well,
not to say too much of the spoilers. I'm sure
yeah,
everybody
yeah,
listening to this has seen
yeah,
it,
yeah,
but just in case.
yeah, yeah. And it just in the very beginning part, he's like, he's like, well, why don't we just level? He's like, well, we can't because and then they'll be fighting. We won't get help at all from the Americans. They won't help us. You
Hmm.
know.
I'm looking at the comments, and there, Brain put a comment in there that was true. He says Elizabeth Taylor was hazardous to one's health. This is the first scandal I ever heard about from my parents when I was a kid, and about how it was really scandalous about these two getting together. And Liz Taylor had so many husbands and stuff, and I really didn't know too much about Liz Taylor other than maybe some commercials and things she did as a kid or on like late night talk shows, which were a bit more popular. And to me, Amber Heard is nothing more than a Liz Taylor wannabe with what she went through with Johnny Depp. I mean, Elizabeth Taylor, wow. I mean, what a beauty. I mean, she just
Well,
was, yeah, those two. Wow. I
he
mean,
did so. He did so himself. He's going for a woman that's half his age,
that's how it goes, though, you know.
and he's an alcoholic too, isn't he? I thought.
Yes. Although I don't think Richard Burton got his face burned off and his finger chopped off
No.
and those things, you know. But that's the thing. Richard Burton, I don't think would have put up with that because one of the great scenes here where you're getting really pumped up is you pointed it out, but it even adds in this. It's like a cumulative effect here. He notices the guy's neck's broke. He meets the strange woman, we'll say, in the barn. They have a conversation, and we, like I said, we find out they have a past, and eventually he's basically saying you're entitled to know nothing. And he doesn't ask anybody anything, and he doesn't seem like he's egotistical, but he just has the sense of I'm the man, do what I say, and it's not even like a thought like he's trying to be domineering or above you. It's just he's in charge, and yeah, it's like put this down, take your clothes off, go do this, give me this, go to the bar down there. I will meet you outside of the bar in a little shack to the right. And it's like, how the hell does he know all this stuff? And you're like, man, this guy came prepared. He knows his stuff. He's been to this place before. He's done his homework. He didn't come in here going, well, no plan is a great plan because we got to be flexible. We have to come to consensus building and all this stupid pseudo nonsense horse crap in business today. It's his show, and already somebody's dead. And then again, like you say, there's the
Yeah,
scenery is
it's,
fantastic. They
it's
had new technology that they used for this, for like some scenes we're going to talk about later, but they filmed on location, a lot of it. And I have to say, in addition to how it's got that grayish, overcast kind of look because it's the middle of the night and dawn's
yeah,
approaching, the music is fantastic. And it seems like it's some of those canned British
yeah.
sound effects, but they just add to the atmosphere of it. And this first 30, 45 minutes is gold.
Yeah, the woman he meets in the barn who's working for him, working with him is Mary Ur or
Hmm.
Ure. She also died of alcoholism too, sleeping pills. Sad. Some of this cast, the way these people went, but that was Hollywood back then, even for them over there. And then not many people were knowledgeable, the effects of like how you can live longer if you don't smoke. But yeah, um, dude. So when they finally get to the German bar where he's supposed to meet her, in the
Hmm.
shed behind the woodshed behind, it's funny when they go in there. It's like and like all of a sudden here comes this the waitress in there played by Ingrid Pitt,
Yes.
phenomenal actress,
Cutie
hot.
pie.
Oh my gosh, she's played and she's like yep, and I don't know if they're in, are they in Switzerland or where are they at? They're in some kind of Alps, and she's got well anyway she's got the whole the German the outfit on
Classic.
the beer mating yeah
Hmm.
yes and
Yeah,
he
he,
pulls her down. Yeah, it's funny. He comes over and he just pulls her lap, and he starts like making it look like he's kissing her, but he's actually whispering in her ear. And he's like, "You're gonna do this, this, and then yeah, and then when you get up, I want you to slap me, you know." And he's sitting in front of the two other German guys, officers there, and like, "Oh, it's like, sir, your behavior is becoming." He's like, "Well, you do who I am. Like, I'm was
Himmler's.
it Hilmrich? Hilmrich's
Himmler.
brother." Himmler's brother, and they're like, oh shit, because everybody who knows Himmler is like the guy who was going to lead the whole. Wasn't he the guy who was on the cult stuff?
Heinrich
I thought.
Himmler, I believe is the
Yeah,
reference.
yeah, yeah,
Well, this scene that you're pointing out is like when he finds the guy that breaks his neck. One of the teammates there is that the character has to be an on your toes, quick thinker, and he is. So you know that, and you see this successful, and you go, okay, here's somebody else he must know. But the fact that he's able to say, okay, let's walk around, let's try to find out some information, and he knows he has to meet somebody, and we know that they all know or don't know that he's going to go do that. So we know he's pressed for time. So you know what the situation is watching this, and you go in there and you can see Clint just staring at him watching him. And because Clint's character doesn't talk at all for the most part till later in the movie,
Well,
he's the action guy. You're watching him watch him, and so the paranoia keeps ratcheting up. And I like I say, Richard Burton's delivery, he just says this, and I'm like, my God, if all
you
right,
remember when he went to go? You remember when he went to go get the radio from the guy with broken neck? So he left him on the cabin,
yep,
and he's like, "Where are you going?" He's like, "Oh, I'm gonna get the radio." He's like, "Okay." It was Blizzard. He's like, "I'll be fine." He can't. Well, he had went back, met the girl in the cabin, and then they did their business and all. They had sex for like what till the morning. Then he
really,
comes back in. He's like, and you see Clint Eastwood there holding his what is it, AK-47 what he has, or the German machine gun.
mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Where you been?" He's like, and Richard Burton's like, "Oh, I got lost." And like you tell right there, he doesn't trust him. He
Yes,
does not trust Richard
yes.
Burton. So then when he sees him and talking to the girl over the girl, he's like, well, he's getting more suspicious. Because he's like, honestly, if I had him, I wouldn't want to piss him off because right now you're making him feel like a pawn. You
Yeah,
know?
and we know we watched this looking back after a good 50 plus years of seeing Eastwood films, knowing he's pretty much an alpha in most of his movies, and that's just him as a natural person. Gives a lot to his natural charisma. However, somewhat relatively new to films at this particular point in his career. So watching at the time, you don't know that. You just know he's the American, and you're like, to your
What,
point, why is this American in here? And like I
what,
say,
what, do you when you say he has resting, I'll kick your ass face.
well, again, the paranoia I think is the best part of this, and it's cramped quarters, and they're in a foreign place, and I just that whole setting atmosphere is fantastic to me. The music, the vibe, the cold weather, the constant whooshing, in the background of the wind and the howling, the blizzard outside. You're surrounded by nothing but enemies. You're in disguise. It's fantastic, and to me, with Richard Burton in this scene, you know, he gets up and he has the second meeting, and then he comes back and somebody's also gotten whacked, is like under a car. I'm looking at this going, wow, this thing is just building, and again, it's a slow burn. It's got a lot of exposition in it, but it's also great just to look at and to watch. And to me, I kept thinking at about this point when the people come down into the bar and they know that there's bad people there, you're like, crap, how did they know? There's a mole. Who's the mole? And that's further emphasis that something is not right. And so it doesn't ever let up. And he basically says, hey, we have to turn ourselves in. And I'm like, I was like, what? I had forgotten about this. And they do it with the idea that being officers, him and Clint Eastwood's character, they would be moved separate from the other three guys. But it's all a part of his quick thinking plan that you find out later on how to, and I'm trying to
Well, yeah,
watch
he
what
what?
I say here because of the plot. We're trying to be spoiler free here. He does this in order to confirm or rule out some possible information, really to rule out certain things too. It's kind of like a
Yeah,
scientific method thing. And I thought at this point here, when after they have the action sequence and they escape from the guys that take them away, is that one, I said before, he's a man's man, he's in charge, but it almost poses a serious question. While we've joked about if we were to send one person to war, it would either be Rambo or Chuck Norris. But then I go, who would I want leading them? It's got to be Richard Burton. I mean, come
yep.
on. It'd be unstoppable. I mean, Richard Burton's performance is that good in
Not the
here.
not the Colonel.
No, he can run
No.
logistics on the ground. He can be broadsword to your Danny boy, if you will.
But yeah, that whole bar scene in there, and then they're looking. Yeah, they're going in there. The German SS or whatever they call the Gestapo.
Mhm.
They're in there like, well, we know we have like five deserters here in this camp. Uh, so and how they do it is like, well, Richard Burton's like, you don't know if he's the one that's going around killing people, or if somebody else is doing it themselves. He doesn't even know because it comes back. He sees a guy checking the ground. And he's like, well, I don't know. He's like, you don't know if he did that earlier, but he's makes it look like like I didn't do it, and you don't know. If maybe at this point, I'm thinking maybe his girlfriend knocked the guy out. Beat him
Yeah,
up,
I wasn't
killed
sure
him.
either. And you can't trust
So
women in a movie. You're automatically thinking, okay,
and
two strange
so
women. Yeah.
so he tells so in order to put the blame on him, like well, Clint Eastwood doesn't trust but he's like, well, then he leaves with Clint Eastwood. He's like, well, here we're gonna sneak out the back, and then we'll walk through, and then no, not so. No, yeah, they all surrender themselves. Then him and Clint Eastwood were in taking on a car, and Clint Eastwood's looking in the mirror, man. Oh my gosh, it's like in these like and Richard Burton's
They do that eye
oh no,
thing.
Richard, yeah, it's just in the front. He's like, this is and yeah, Richard Burton's in the back, Clint Eastwood's in the front. He's like, he's like on your mark, now. uh, and how, I mean, they're clever how they dispose of the bodies and stuff. It's just like one thing after another. This is a good movie. I'll probably watch it again soon.
Yeah, I mean
It's
they escape. This is obviously where it starts turning into more of the
it.
action part where they're getting ready to go up to the castle, um, and they don't. They look like they're having not difficulty, but it's not like snack your neck, you're done. It's like no, this it's tough. It's not easy. Now they kill a gazillion Nazis in here, but that being said, up to this point, everything's they're trying to be sneaky, and here they actually have to use force. So they're really trying not to let people find out who they are and everything too. But by this point, they're like, man, we still got to march on with the mission. And he's radioed by himself, basically saying, I can't hear you over and out, because he knows he's got to finish this mission for a lot of reasons, which we'll find out by the end of the movie. And so yeah, this comes to, I think, I always remembered the climbing scene. Everyone always told me about the climbing scene, and to me, I think more of the cars going up and down in that scene, which we'll talk about in a moment. But when you find out that the two ladies know him and they're going to be a part of this, you're like, okay, let's bring it on. Bringing more to the party. But yeah, I mean, by this point, we've only seen the Nazis a little bit. We know that the guy that's in charge of the SS stuff, the guy that's pretty, that's got the hots for one of the chicks, he's going to be involved into it more than the other guys. And of course, that's ended up being the case. But yeah, so I like how this movie's patient with them going through everything, and awesome. It's so awesome that they have to climb up. Now, I know that there's a lot of stunt doubles, and I know you can tell in some scenes. It doesn't really break it for me like it might in some things where like any of the Fast and Furious movies where I'm like, yeah, whatever. I still could watch something like this today because I tell you, watching them get into the castle, and before we even talk about the castle stuff, they just take their time with it, and it's so patient, and they have everything thought out and so planned. It's like, man, this is MacGyver before MacGyver. This is Jason Bourne before Jason Bourne. You know what? This is Indiana Jones even before there was Indiana Jones. I mean, it's not even close. It's a good 10 plus years before that. It's just, again, you're transitioning from the sneaky side to the thriller side. Then it's going to be the shootout side, basically in the third act. But yeah, this movie, like you said, it's tight. There's a lot going on. It's long, but it doesn't feel
Yeah,
slow. It's just intense to
this
me.
is doesn't this feel like Kelly's kind of like Kelly's Heroes mixed with like the Iger sanction?
I mean, I could see that
And
way. It's just missing Richard Burton.
yeah, right. Because the Iger sanction is another one that where Clint Eastwood was climbing. He had to do a freehand, and yeah, that whole climbing scene. She's like, "Aren't you gonna help your friend?" And I'm like, "Well, if he makes me, makes it. I'm gonna give him help." I'm thinking, is he a spy or is he not a spy? And I'm looking like there's so much criminal evidence against him, being like he's got to be the guy that's going around just like offing people. But
Well,
yeah,
some people
it's
might think it's a little sexist. Some spots, the way they would treat the women, like take your clothes off, this, that, whatever. And this scene too kind of made me go, well, is it supposed to be sexist? Because he's like, no, he can help himself, and it's one of those things. It's despite this woman being a competent field agent, she still has that nurturing type side. Oh, why don't you help him? And it's like, no, the dude's half my age. He can do it. And you're right. It not only could you say something about that, you could say to your point, who's the bad guy? Doesn't need to help him. Would you help somebody? Probably, maybe, but I don't know. And frankly, it allowed him to kind of look at something, and it's a nice little scene because there's a moment where she's staring at him while he's looking at the map, and you can tell she's kind of got the hots for him a little bit. That obviously they've had a past, but you can tell that it's still there. And it was just a nice little scene that doesn't really add up to anything in this movie, but it was a nice little touch. But yeah, so basically they're trying to find this guy, and the guy's at least one level of a swerve, and they get to, I'm trying to be very generic here for this scene. There's a big scene basically where they recognize the fact that their three other teammates have been brought to the castle, but they're also supposed to get the American out, and the two ladies are in there, and so they get to where they see in this giant hall where they're sitting down eating, they're basically getting ready to torture the American. And all I'm going to sit here and say is, and it's hard for me to say this and to be serious about it the way it sounds. However, it's absolutely true. Richard Burton takes about 10 to 15 minutes pulling a Richard Burton where he really talks his way into kicking everybody's ass, and it comes across as this guy's just winging it off the top of his head. But like earlier, he's throwing stuff out there that he knows will help eliminate certain possibilities, which by deduction will allow him to figure out who the mole is and who the spy is, or basically what the hell is going on. And Clint Eastwood's like, I don't know what the hell's going on. He calls Clint Eastwood a punk. He pulls out a gun, and basically he's standing around this table and he's got a gun on all the Nazi bad guys, all the people in there, and without saying really anything about the roles of the people in there, there's a whole thing about putting lists down of people and this and that, and you're like, my God, I can't think of hardly any actor that can just be so convincing the way they're delivering these lines and the way they're doing it in a situation. It's almost unbelievable. I mean, not quite as much as the Nazi kill count we're going to get to in a moment, but Burton is fantastic in here. He totally owns it. And I'm looking at him going, that is an actor. My God, I would want to be like him if I were an actor, just how he's able to do this in this kind of movie, in this kind of role. What did you think
Mhm.
about that big scene, Doctor?
The whole scene, I thought was, dude, I was enjoying it. I guess this whole entire movie is I've been enjoying it ever since the whole bar scene where they make their escape and they get getting to the castle. This was your Ocean's 11's kind of like that, except that there's only two that you cannot trust.
Well, numbers
They
numbers
get that.
aside, on the trust
This
column.
is your so like I said, I enjoy this movie all the way up until the end. The whole scene on the cable car, though, that was just like, oh my gosh.
Well, let's talk
The
about
only is
that. They basically end up all leaving for the most part, and they have to
oh
descend on the cable cars.
well, first they have to get in the castle. Remember, they had to sneak. Clint Eastwood and Richard Burton had to go onto the cable car while his three other guys with the party are on inside the cable car with the Germans. So that's how they get up. And how they get up is like if they get to the very top. There, she has the girl they're working with that Richard Burton was working with. And she gets to the castle. She had to flirt with the Gestapo guy who was like really infatuated with her.
Hmm.
Guy is really creepy and pervy.
Yeah, he
Uh,
was. It's
over the
only up there
top.
in the Alps.
Yes, you know. So she's at the castle and she's like, well, she's like, I'm tired. I gotta go to bed if they had dinner or whatever. So then she sneaks in another room, and you see how you got this boards going across support beams. She just rips the planks out, ties a rope there, and she throws it out the rope out of the ring. She straps it down because at first, because in order to get up there at the very top without the Germans seeing them, they had to go on the top. So they had their ice picks, or we call it picks, or
Climbing picks.
so, they climb picks, yeah.
Hmm.
And when they get up there at the top, they basically jump out. And the only thing is that Clint Eastwood barely remember he slides down,
Yes.
and
Yes.
he has to help him out because his legs are dangling where anybody can see him if they're looking.
Hmm.
But I very luckily that no one did. I thought that was hilarious. I was like, dude, I thought he was gonna get caught right there. If it would have been a video game, I would have been shot and I would have died. I would have to restart over. Um, like I said, when they climbed up and all that stuff, and then they start planting the bombs everywhere.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh,
it's a
that
little
was
video game-ish. They have so much explosives, but yeah, that's what they did. And of course, that
well,
means every single one's going to go off.
yeah. And I remember before they went to the castle, they were planting bombs. They're pulling little strings on them. It looked like the ones you'd have on the back of a toy. I was like, hi, how's it going? Little toy strings, Uh,
Chucky dolls everywhere. Drawstrings, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so man, yeah. The whole scene in the castle when the guys were throwing the grenades was authentic because that's what the Germans had it too. Man, it brought me back to my Call of Duty days for PS1.
I know, I know.
We were playing War, yes. No, but I loved it. The whole hallway scene. He's like, "Can you hurry it up?" well, the guy's kind of dead. The radio operator,
Mm-hmm.
and he's trying to get like, this is brunch or whatever, broadsword the Danny Boy or whatever they call there.
Broadsword of Danny Boy, famous line.
Wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, the whole season with the Germans start coming on the whole wave and they're in on their fight, and then they bring in the whole freaking turret and it's a big giant heavy caliber machine gun.
Yeah.
I was like, man, and they're shooting the concrete and like they're really shooting because they're seeing holes in the concrete. So I don't know because usually there's people that shoot blanks, so I don't know what they're shooting, because I'd be afraid it's gonna bounce off. So
I don't know that. I don't know the
unless
specifics with that. But to
well
me, this is the
unless they're
least
shooting
favorite
dump.
part for me with all this kind of stuff because I like again like all the intrigue and the spy stuff too. This is just action for action's sake. It picks up when they actually get to that point where they're going out onto the cable cars.
Yeah, yeah, the whole thing. Do you think they're using? They must have been using dummy bullets so to put holes in the wall and stuff. Because remember, it was probably fake concrete. It wasn't really concrete. It was just like paper mache.
Well, these
I
effects
was
were
thinking,
special, and that's why they call them that.
yeah, so way better than what you see in CG.
Well, speaking of
Um,
CG and special effects, the cable cars. This was I don't know if they called it like a front projection device, something, but there was a way that they were able to film it and they were able
oh,
to project stuff.
they had a green screen. It was a green screen behind them.
Well, this was one of the first big uses of this ability in a film. And here's the thing. I'm a big James Bond fan. We've covered all the movies here on the Extreme Movie Show. We'll certainly cover them again with the new one coming out. And for me, one of my guilty pleasures is Moonraker. Yes, it's a bad film. However, it's mindlessly entertaining. And there's a scene in there that I really liked. That some scenes look great and some don't look so great. And of course, that's the cable car scene there in Brazil with Jaws and James Bond. And they're going back and forth. That is an embarrassment compared to this one in here because of the stunt doubles and they spent more time on it. Some of it looked like real film shots. Obviously, there's some projection going on too. But yeah, it's there's a nice little uh, ice
It was
pick or
funny though.
pickaxe kind of little fight there, whatever, the guy hanging on Burton's leg or
Oh
whatever
yeah,
like that.
he's
I mean,
perfect.
it's tense.
Yeah,
It's
he
done
stabbed the
really
he's
well.
oh you felt it when he stabbed the guy in the arm with the
Yes.
ice pick. He's like, ah, he's holding on by one arm. He's like, he's able to somehow get himself into the thing with one arm, curl back in. But in his buddy, who's still fighting against Burton, he's in there. All of a sudden, they're fighting more. He kicks him again, and he knocks it. And then the guy's hanging by his boot. He's like, no, no, no. And the guy's trying to with one arm trying to grab him. And the guy goes, ah! You see him fall like his death. It's like it was so cheesy because the green screen behind him. It would have been better if they just went this not show the green screen where he's falling. Just show the body like they did.
Yeah.
Cut that whole green screen out and just let him fall.
Yeah, I mean, and this
But
seems like it's going faster. It's the end of the movie because they didn't, do like 30 minutes, 30 minutes, 30 minutes of act one, two, three. The first one was a lot longer. And so to me, again, this action, I like how it's action and it's pretty much nonstop and it's all at the end of the movie. Here, they basically get to the ground. They reunite with the other girl, Heidi. Not and Ingrid's with them, but they had already prepped the road when they had escaped from when they had got caught with mines. Here they had already prepared this like bus that they're using to get away from their getaway vehicle, and they get them, and they're getting ready to go to this airfield, and there's looks like we would say, oh, it's like an A-team scene or whatever, but again, 50 years ago plus. That's like I'm not sure how many times this has been done before. So at the time, it's pretty good. And you see burning Nazis, you see them getting blown up, you see them getting shot, all this kind of stuff. Of course, they just make it onto the plane, most of them, and really, without again spoiling it or saying anything, there's not just a twist, maybe not a double twist, but maybe a triple twisty in this. But it all makes sense, and it explains why Clint Eastwood's character is in there. It explains about why they were getting an American out. It explains about the three people that were on his team, but they weren't really the focus of the movie. The two bosses were there at the end. It explains all the way from the very beginning of the movie, the first minute, when the two bosses are explaining what's going on, and Richard Burton's there talking about stuff. John Smith, I mean, an unforgettable name, but yeah, I like to say the actors' names. That's how I think of it. And then, as soon as the movie ends, which is all I'm going to say, it ends in a manly way. that's it. The credits roll and boom, you're done. And it's like, wow, where did the 2.5 hours go? Because, like I say, it is so enticing to me. And I almost felt like the movie was over by the time they got to the castle because the way films are these days, you get like a little bit of, strategy maybe in the middle and then at the end a little bit of action or suspense, and that's not it. So for me, this whole last part was the weakest of the entire movie, but that's only because for me, it's what I don't care about as much as the spy stuff and the really intense stuff. But that's how I see this last part. What about you?
Like you said, remember they planted bombs on things so they get their getaway stuff. It brought, and I didn't put when I first watched this, I didn't put two and two together. Is why I'm like, yeah, they went to the bus, first. He's like, here, put the stuff in there, and they're checking, make sure I see if it's running out, and then they went to the castles, and it dawned on me that they're gonna go back down and try to sneak over to the bus and use that as a getaway.
Yeah,
But the whole plane thing, the only thing that would have made this more like Fast and Furious if they would have drove into the plane.
I know. I don't want to see that. No, it seemed. I mean, it's
But
you get plenty of action, you get plenty of explosions, plenty of dead Nazis flying around screaming.
I just want this as a game.
I know exactly. I've thought
Wouldn't
that
it be a
ever
great
since
video
I've
game?
seen it. Yeah, where you have to somehow breach the castle, and I know there's a lot of open world games there, Far Cry, all these others that are like this that you can
Yeah,
do
you're
different
like
things.
Wolfenstein and stuff and all, but no, this is like I would love to play this as a MMO. Where you have multiple people you can play and you can storm this.
No, I agree totally. It'd be
Um,
pretty awesome. Well,
uh,
my final thoughts for this movie is, like I've said, I kind of gushed over it at the beginning. This is a must-see action film. It's just a fantastic classic movie. I think for me, this movie, without getting into all the details of all the war movies after this, or even adventure movies like I'd mentioned before, some of the big ones like Raiders of the Lost Ark, I think this is the template for what action type movies become. It's not movies before this to me for the most part weren't like this too much. That being said, after this, you can definitely see where if you just do action right, you get a nice blend of some thriller spy stuff in it. It's a hard formula to screw up, and it gets screwed up so many times. And while I had mentioned comparing the cable car scenes to Moonraker and James Bond, think about James Bond and how horrible it's been for about 20 years now, ever since Dalton pretty much was gone. The Brosnan's
and
movies
not
are
we're
all.
talking about Timothy. I'll just say we're talking about Timothy Dalton, not Dalton the Theater.
Oh, that is correct, sir. Absolutely not. He would authenticate the Bond's badness currently. That
Yes,
being said, Bond was a foodie. He's not anymore. I mean, everything that we came to know as the character of Bond, gone. I mean, just watered down in this Me Too type movie, and it's all pandering. This movie, you see where maybe it seems like he's being sexist to the women. You find out they have a past. You find out they're competent people. They're strong women. They're part of the group. They are not, just figureheads sitting in the background. They're vital to this movie, and everybody working together as a team is vital. Yet you still have a boss, you still have somebody in control, which is Richard Burton, who delivers. You have a heavy like Clint Eastwood that you just automatically assume is going to carry the movie or a big part of it. He is, but silently so, and so everybody works to their strengths. And when I say this is a simple film, it really is, even though the plot is very complicated. And it just seems like a lot of modern movies today and action movies really have strayed away from this, that they just don't follow that. And that's why movies that just try to exaggerate one thing like The Fast and the Furious, it's a fail to me. It's ridiculous. It's not rewatchable. It's I understand certain things aren't going to be believable. I'm not saying this movie is 100% believable. That being said, it's damn good. It's an all-timer, and it really, I think, when we come talk about a good action movie that comes out, we talked about how James Bond tried to change because of the first Jason Bourne movie, The Bourne Identity. I think both of them, owe a lot of respect to this film and how great it is. Yeah, so to me, this movie's fantastic. It's 10 of 10, 5 of 5, however you want to do it, double thumbs up. I'm sure you've seen it. Go watch it again. It's a great movie, and like I said at the beginning, it's an all-time Father's Day type movie. So there you go. What about you, Doctor? What are your final thoughts?
my final thoughts on this is don't trust anyone if you're
DTA is
going
rule
into a
number
German
one.
castle.
You know what rule number two is, right? Don't get caught.
Well, we don't.
And then rule number
Rule number
three
two is we
is
don't
deny
talk about.
everything. That's true.
Rule number two is wash your hands.
No names. Yeah, We're Eagles Dare. Richard Burton, Clint Eastwood, an all-time extreme classic. Fantastic film. Doctor, I gotta say, I didn't realize that, and I'm really excited for you in that this is the first time you saw Richard Burton. Say something about
I,
that at least.
about all the Burtons I've watched, this is the best Burton.
Outside of
The other
Tim Burton,
Burton,
I don't know who
he
else.
does not exist.
It's when I see guys like Richard Burton, I look at actors today and go, really?
This
I,
is the guy that could have played General Lane in the Superman movie.
this guy could have done anything. He's that damn good. Richard Burton. Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for listening. If you haven't seen it, go see it. If you haven't listened to one of our shows, go listen to them. I appreciate you guys getting involved in the tweeting and the sharing. We're creeping up to about 500 subs now, so we're doing really good. We've been on for not quite a year yet, really making some
Yeah.
headway. Really appreciate it. The classic film people that are around, it's almost like a different group, and I know they love movies a lot, and so I've got a lot of positive responses for that, so I'm really pumped up for that. So for Doctor, for myself, for Eglinton, for My Love Comics, Old Man Comics, the Homegrown Tourist, the Semi-Shadow Band Singer, the Curator of Comics, Eglinton, I'd like to say thank you for listening. Go watch Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. That's on the list. There's definitely more Burton coming, Eric. That's why you
And,
came from a cold,
and
possibly.
don't
Absolutely.
write it. Of all the movies I've seen with cable cars being destroyed, don't go in them.
Yeah, you're always right on top, people. Come on. Yeah, Who's
Right?
Afraid of Virginia Woolf? I don't know if that's something you would like, Doctor, so I've shied away from the ones that people go, oh, that's their best performances. It's more about the ones we like because it's our show. And so I thought you would like this. I'm glad you got a chance to really see it with Richard Burton. Appreciate it. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Doctor, is it's pretty intense. It's pretty interesting look at relationships, let's say. So on that note, I'd like to say thanks for listening, and as always, stay classy. How about that? Good night, everybody.
Good night.